It's a pretty common thing. Now this is the bracket for the ladder, and it has its own shaft. It's also attached with the mushroom ended thing. So I'm using the same Dremel tool with the grindstone to take off that small mushroom. And I'm using the same tool, but I have to wind this one around because it doesn't spin like the axles do for the wheels. Now you can see I'm using a cheap aftermarket grindstone, and this is the third axle I've done and it's already toast. So next time I think I'll buy a better quality one, a name brand one. So I took off just enough so that I could force that thing out. And so there I have the bracket and the broken piece of ladder taken off. The bracket will have to be straightened out. Otherwise it's in pretty good condition, just needs some straightening out. So there we've got it. I think there's 24 parts to this model. And this is the bottom of the Dinky toys have sheet metal bottom most of the time. Certainly from this era. I'm not even sure if they ever went to anything else. And this one has suffered a little bit. The toy's been well played with, and it's gotten dented and pushed in, and it's resulted in the sheet metal being bent. So straighten that out. So now, after taking off the base, I need to put a screw where I'm going to reattach the base later on, but I want to do it now because then I can put the screw in place, and when I paint the model, the screw will get painted as well. It also protects the threads, and I don't want to be going in there with a drill and a tap when it's already painted. So it's better to do it in an early stage. So now we're still disassembling because I haven't taken the tires off of the hubs. So these tires are a hard plastic. So the way to do it, they won't come off unless you soften them up. And the way to soften them up is with hot water. So this was boiling water. They've been left in there for a few minutes. And I found that you can't take these off if you just press them as they are. You have to put them on the axle. So you can watch what I do. I'll put it on the axle, and now I can get the leverage that you need so I can take the rubber off of the hub. And that's working just fine. So now I'm putting them into a reusable, disposable kitchen container, and we got the paint stripper. Don't have a lot of choice of paint stripper. This is the stuff that I could get off of Amazon. We're on lockdown. I can't just walk into a hobby store or into the hardware store and choose through the paint strippers. This is what they had at Amazon, so this is what I'm using. It doesn't smell much, so it's good for using indoors, and it's wintertime, so I don't really want to do this outside because it's very cold. to be using sandpaper, many levels of sandpaper, to polish this thing up. And so I want to take off the sharp edges. Um, they're not visible, but they're going to cut my sandpaper apart. So the first thing I have to do is take off the, the deep cuts and deep scratches. So instead of starting with the sandpaper, I'm starting with a file. This is a very good quality file. You don't want to do it with anything that's poor quality file. This I've had for many years. I use it for everything. It's brilliant. It cuts well, and it's always perfect smooth finish. Even if it looks like it's dirty, it still cuts perfectly smoothly. So this is micro mesh. This is the stuff I'm going to be sanding the windshield with. This is designed starting at 2400. So this is designed for refinishing aircraft windows. The mushroom end so that it's clean and shiny. Now it's freshly sanded, so I'm going to put a little bit of the best for doing painting of these models. I'm going to have to get some other kind of sticks because mixing it with a toothpick is it's maybe takes a little bit too much work. I've got these pipettes. I bought a whole bunch of them, figuring if I decant my paint from the jar into my mixing cup using the pipette, that I would save on paint that would get spilled over the edge of the jar. But then I'm thinking, I'm not sure this is a good idea because I'm leaving a bunch of paint inside the pipette. So you can see I took 2 pipettes full and then one of thinner to mix it up. And I do mix it up, but I don't know what happened to the video of doing that. But it's basically 2 to 1 with thinner with paint. So magic, I've mixed it up. Now this is my airbrush. It has a compressor in that handle, a little one. And look at the amount of paint that I put in there. I only mix that small amount of paint for this stuff because you want it to have good quality bristles. The problem is the paint was drying too fast and it didn't leave a smooth finish. So this is the paint that I was using, but this time I said, okay, let's tape this thing and spray it, and poof, forgot to turn the camera on. So anyway, it got done and test it. Oh, it's dry. So I can take the tape off now. See how it comes out. It looks beautiful. Look at that. That's the way they would have done it at the factory. Maybe not with tape, but with some kind of a mask. So now I'm not doing an exact restoration. I want to upgrade the model a bit because I kind of didn't like the hose reel, for example, on the side there. So what I've done is I've painted the reels silver and the hose tan. The whole thing in the original version is the whole thing is just painted gray. and I never liked it. Um, I mean, the toy was all scratched up, but I didn't like just that plain gray in there. Now what I'm doing here is when I painted that hose, even though the red paint had dried for a long time, and I'd put it into the under a lamp with a light bulb, so it heats it up to, instead of putting it into an oven, it's a little bit less harsh. But I've had it for half an hour under in what I call the easy bake oven. It's a light bulb, and it heats it up and it dries it. But as soon as you put the paint on it, it's the same aqueous paint, and it just dissolves, and the red starts coming through while you're painting it. So then you have to let that dry, and then I'm coming in here, I think twice, or this is the third time coming in, to get the rest of the little bits of red that smudged through. And then once that's done, it looked fine. Again, I'm using that fine brush. I painted all those little latches. There's all these toolboxes and handles, and the casting sticks out, so it makes it fairly easy to paint them without the paint going too far astray. But it really adds sparkle to the model. I'm not doing perfect restorations. I'm doing detailing. I'm improving them. Probably some people will disapprove of that, but I want to have fun. Now, I told you about the orange skin. I'm using this pledge. In the States, it even says on it, it used to be called Future back in the day, and now it's just called Pledge. On the American ones, it says right on the thing that it contains Future, so they have their old label printed on the new label because that's what people are going to be looking for. But that's the one. It's called the Floor Gloss, and I just put it in there without thinning it. Just goes straight into the airbrush, and you basically you're varnishing it with the floor polish. It goes on easy, it's self-leveling, and it gives it a very, very nice shine, so I don't have to worry that I'm not that good at painting it. I can always fix it later. Of course, I want to learn to do it so I can do it straight with the paint. So we're back to the ladder. That little piece is not going to do us any good, so I sent to the Kingdom of Auixe to what's his name, Steve Flowers, and I ordered new ladders. And these are very nice. They need a little bit of cleanup, but they're generally pretty good condition. So I filed a little bit down, and took off some flashing and made it more tidy. So into the spray booth, and this is the primer, I believe. So I had to prime. There's two ladders. There's a lower ladder and then the upper ladder that slides. So this is the lower ladder that has the pivot on it, and here's that silver paint again. And that silver paint works great when you spray it straight out of the can, so I kept using it for everything else. So there's the upper ladder. And I've never tried the silver paint through the airbrush, but I find that the stuff out of the can is so there we go. Now that's the parts all ready to reassemble, all shiny and new. You can see I painted a little silver on the hubs to give them a little bit more splash. Now I've got to put the bells back on, and I've got no way of re-riveting the rivets. They've been ground off. There's nothing to hammer in there. So I'm just going to use a little bit of epoxy, and I'm not gluing them in so much as I'm creating a head with the epoxy. So it's just putting a bit on the inside, so when the rivet goes in, it just touches the epoxy. So then what it's going to do when it hardens is it makes like a head. It's fairly soft, but this isn't going to be played with by a child. This is going to sit in a display case, so it just needs to hold it there when the model is being handled. So I put it in, and then I spread the epoxy around a little bit. Now you can see I've got a pad, and once the glue is dried, I just peel a page off of the pad and I've got a fresh pad. I don't have to look for a scrap piece of cardboard like I used to do. Now for the windshield, I'm going to do a similar trick. I didn't put any glue under the windshield, but the rivet that I ground off is still there. I'm going to put a little bit of white glue. And the glue attaches itself to the windshield on the top, but it also glues itself to the rivet, and it makes a new head for it, and it can just be soaked off if somebody wants to redo it. So I'm going back to this bracket for the ladder, and I'm looking at it, it's all bent, so I'm going to straighten it out, make it look like it's fresh and new. And the bottom, it's all twisted, so I hold on to that, and then I will bend those ends back into position so that they're square with the bottom. So there, nice and square. So now I got to put the rivet back in, and guess what? I have to bend them back again. There's a reason why they were bent that way, because they have to be tight on the ladder. So you put it back together without bending it in, and it's going to be too loose, and then it's just going to flop. So I had to make it tighter. So I bent them now, and let's see. So now it goes in, and it's going to stay tight. So when you move it up and down, it's not just going to flop back down. So this is the rivet heading trick. There's a nail with a little dimple, and I put it on the drill press, and the thing goes nuts, but it worked. I'm not thrilled with this method. I may try and work with it again, but look at that, it's tight, it stays, it doesn't just flop down anymore. So this is the shaft that the ladder mounts on. I didn't show where I drilled it out and tapped it, but there's a little screw. This one's smaller. The other screw I used was a 440 screw. This is a 256 screw. Because the shaft is very small, it needs a smaller screw. But to put it back together, I have to put it through, and then it's a lock washer, but it behaves like a spring. And when I screw it down, there's a lock washer goes on there, and then there's a flat washer, and I'm using the original one. And then I put the screw on top and tighten it down, and it tightens down on that little spring washer. So it gives a pressure on it so that there's pressure, but you can still move and rotate it. And there you can see it stays up. So you got all the motion you need. It's perfect. Now it took me a little while to figure out how that ladder goes on, but I did figure it out. And I had to file off little bits of the casting, but the casting is pretty good. And so I was able to quickly tidy it up so that it would slide nicely, and I figured out how it was set up by looking at pictures online. So now we go to the wheels. There you can see where I've painted the hubs with a little bit of silver. I found that they just look, it just gives them a little bit, I don't know, it looks sharper, it gives it some bling. Once again, they go into the boiling hot water, and after a couple of minutes they should be soft. Now I tried, this is not my first try, but I figured out how to do it. Put it back on the axle like when I was taking them off, put it in the vise, and then pull up on it, and it pops into place. And that's the best way to do that. There was no other way to push it in without the leverage and without putting it in the vise. So now I can put this thing back together again. I'm going to have to mushroom out the end of that axle. So I didn't use the drill press trick this time. Instead, I have a very small ball peen hammer, and I used the small hammer because it's a small thing, and you kind of go around the axle until it mushrooms out, and you don't have to mushroom it out much, just enough so that so the wheel doesn't come through anymore. Trick is to use a small hammer, not a big hammer. So with the wheels back on the base, it's time to put the base back on the model. So on the front, it's obvious. I've got my screw that's now been painted. There's a little swarf there still. Clean that off. And I put my base back on. The back, it goes onto the rivet. It's still there. Pops on. And then I've got the hook that goes onto the back as well. And that goes over the rivet. And now the rivet is ground down to the level of that hook. I can put the screw back on the front, and that's fine. But the back, you can't drill the back out because there's no material there. There's just a little bit of casting sticking out, but it's very thin. You would have to drill right through, and you'd have a screw coming through at the top. It wouldn't look good. So I have to find some way to attach it. So I decided I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the windshield and with the bells. But I'm going to decorate it because this is all going to be visible. So I'm taking a screw and painting the head red so it matches the other one. I'm going to make it look like it's screwed in place. But instead of tapping a hole, which I can't do, I'm going to cut the head off in the bandsaw. Put it in the vice grip and take the head off. Just file it down smooth so that it sits flat. It's going to look like there's a screw in there, but it's just going to be glued in place, and it's going to behave like a mushroomed end. So again, I'm mixing up my two-part epoxy, and I'm going to put a head on the rivet. So that pulled off my hook. So there's going to be a little bit of glue under there. That's okay. I'm going to glue that head. Put that on there carefully. Oops. There, fell in place. Move it over and straighten the hook out and let it set. So this is what the model looked like. We'll remind you, it's in pretty rough shape. You can see that gray painted hose reel and the wheels without the extra silver. And none of the details are painted other than the front grille and bumper and headlights. And here it is, all finished. Has its beautiful shiny paint, has the details painted up. On the back you can see I painted gold on the valves and wheels, and I also painted the hoses on the back the same tan as I painted the smaller hoses on the sides. Looks like a beautiful toy. I finished this just before Christmas, and my grown-up son came and saw it. He said it looks like a Christmas ornament, and it really does. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Timo's Dinky Detailing, and hope you'll be back to see more. In the meantime, you can like and subscribe to my channel. Be seeing you.